They offer perspectives that lawmakers may not have considered before. I know when I was elected, coming out of the classroom, I was a 9th grade English teacher. There's a lot that I don't know, I didn't know, and I still don't know. And so a lobbyist can give you a perspective. And doesn't mean you have to do what they say or take their money or anything like that. They're just there to offer maybe some thoughts or points that you hadn't thought about before. So I was just curious, by a show of hands, who in here has ever met with their elected official, written an email, made a phone call to their local elected official? Okay, yeah, at what level?
What do you mean?
Like
state level?
State level, okay, so you either contacted your state representative, your state senator. Of course, we have 2 U.S. senators that are in Washington, D.C. We have 5 Congress members who represent all of Oklahoma. And we have 101 state representatives that represent different districts around the state. And we have 48 state senators. And then you go down a little bit more local than that. You have your city council members, your elected school board members, where it gets to be hyper-local. And so they all serve a purpose and address different needs. Now, as a state representative, we get calls pretty regularly, anywhere ranging from the war going on in Gaza to the pothole over on Shields. And it's great because we can refer them out to the right person. If it's our federal delegation, we can make that connection. If it's with their city council member, we can make that connection. But it's really interesting. I always like to open up my talks with how many people have actually reached out to their elected officials. And we got one here, but it's something that's not quite done too often. And I see a lot of people who go to the social media and they express their opinions, which is all fine and great. But my message is going to be about diversifying that political outreach. How do you get a message out there aside from just a well-meaning, well-written social media post, which can be very effective. Don't get me wrong. We'll get into the citizen-led ballot initiative, and I'll tell you some stories of some people that I've interviewed for my book who have made extraordinary changes by a simple Facebook post. I want to tell you a story about when I was first elected in 2016. I received a letter, an email, from a 9-year-old named Kaylee who went to a fair in Cleveland County. She's having a great time with her grandma, her mom. They were playing the carny games, they were riding the rides, eating the funnel cakes. And then she came across this one carny game where she noticed these little goldfish were being used as prizes. Unfortunately, like half of them were floating belly up. The water was hot, it was murky, and she had this instinct. She said, I don't think that's right. She said, I think it's morally wrong to use pets as prizes. And so she wanted to rescue one. So she, you know how carny games are, they're pretty hard. So she played, she lost, she played, she lost, and she kept playing, and finally she won her a goldfish, a live goldfish, and she named him Ripples. Took Ripples home, put him in some fresh water, gave him some fish flakes. The next day she woke up, and poor Ripples was dead. So she, of course, mourned her little pet and its loss, and then she decided she wanted to do something about it. So she wrote her elected official, me, and she said, with the help of her mom, of course, we don't believe that pets should be used as prizes. She did her research. She found out that beyond just goldfish, there's also iguanas, puppies, kittens, hamsters. A lot of pets are being used as prizes at state fairs and carnivals. And so she came to the Capitol and she presented this with me. In my office, it was barely decorated, still not decorated, but we sat down and I heard her heartfelt testimony. I heard her story, and I said, you know what, Kaylee, we're going to do something about it. We're going to work together, work on legislation to ban pets as prizes across the entire state of Oklahoma. So we wrote up the legislation, we submitted it. The first week of committee work went by, nothing. Second week of committee work went by, nothing. And then we got into the third committee week, which we are in right now, but this was back in 2017, and still didn't have a hearing on the committee agenda. So I went to the committee chair and I said, Chairman, will you please give us an opportunity to present this bill? If it doesn't pass, if it fails, at least it failed on its own merit. And we've given this little girl an opportunity to have her bill heard. You know what he said? He looked up at me and he said, Dollens, we've got bigger fish to fry. And I said, true, but this is important we've got a lot of capacity to do things. And he said, just get out. So I had to go back and I had to tell Kaylee, I'm sorry, but your bill's not even going to get a chance to be voted on. So you can imagine she was upset. And she was crying. And her mom's like, what can we do now? And I said, well, you know, you've got a great story. 9-year-old Kaylee's very articulate. Let's see if the local news wants to cover it. So we reached out to KFOR and we said, hey, we've got this story of this little girl that's trying to affect change. And he's like, yeah, we're interested. So they came out and did a story on her. And they did this great package. I'll have to show you sometime. And it went out there on the news. A couple days later, I got a call from an elected official in Cleveland County. Said, hey, I saw that little girl's story on the news. It makes a lot of sense. We want to meet with her and her mom. So we arranged a meeting at the Capitol. And they said, you know, we think you're right. We're going to ban Pets as Prizes in Cleveland County. And so something really good came out of that. And can you imagine this 9-year-old who got a great example, great experience of making change at the local level. And so often things don't go exactly as we had wanted, but she was able to pivot, to turn a setback into a comeback, get a message out there, and affect change. And while that isn't the entire state of Oklahoma, it's still the Cleveland County. And since then, who knows how many counties have seen that and decided it was a good idea and did the same thing in their community. And so it's a perfect example of how being innovative and pushing a message can help you get across the finish line, even though it's not maybe the finish line that you expected it would be. Turning setbacks into comebacks is something that I've unknowingly been doing for a while now. When I grew up in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, and when I was a little kid, I had one goal, and that was to play Division I football. And from there on, it dictated all of the choices I made, from going to class to, making good grades, not fighting, going to practice. And one problem, we had a terrible football team. We won 3 games my junior year, 1 game my senior year. I remember after my last game, my head coach was fired, and there wasn't a recruiter within 50 miles of Bartlesville. They were all at Jinx and Union and Broken Arrow and Owasso, teams that had beat us really bad for my entire high school career. And so I remember going into the coach's office because it was unlocked. I went into the room where they kept all the film, and I took the game film from my sophomore year to my senior year, minus my last game because that never made it to VHS. Found a wedding videographer, put together some of my highlights, and I just started sending those out to colleges all around me, from D2 schools to D1 schools. And in 1 month, I went from 0 offers to 3. I got my first offer was Missouri State, and then Louisiana Monroe, and then Colorado State, and then actually it was 4, and then SMU, Southern Methodist University. And I took a trip to all 3 of them, all 4 of them, and decided SMU was a perfect distance, not too far, not too close, and I took that opportunity. And going from small town Bartlesville with not much to Dallas was a huge eye-opener, a big perspective change. Decided I'd major in English, decided to specialize in creative writing because I've always enjoyed storytelling. And after my senior year, we played Army and got beat in a bowl game, but was fortunate enough to get to go to the Hawaii Bowl and win that one. I had a setback. My younger brother unexpectedly died. He was 18 years old, I was 22. He had always wanted me to try out for the league. At this point, I had no intention of doing that, but to honor him, to channel some of that emotional energy, I decided, in honor of him, I'd try out for the NFL. So for 4 months, I trained super hard and lost some weight. I was a D lineman. I got pretty cut, so I tried out as a linebacker, which they're doing that right now, the whole NFL draft thing. So I did the pro day, performed pretty well, didn't get drafted, of course. And so about 2 weeks later, I got a call from the United States Olympic Bobsledding Team. And they asked me if I wanted to go to Lake Placid, New York and try out for the 4-man bobsled. And I asked them, why are you asking me? I'm a football player. And they said, exactly. And I realized when I got up to Lake Placid, New York, and I flipped on my head going 95 miles per hour down an ice track at, a mile long with a 400-pound sled on top of me, hitting every turn on the way down, That's when I realized why they recruit football players. Because the other two guys in my sled were track athletes, and they'd never been hit like that before. And they left, never saw them again. So I had this new opportunity to represent the United States. You know, I was now around teammates, which I needed. I was around some positive outlets. It could have been the opposite when I was still mourning my brother. And I got the opportunity to not only go to Canada, first time outside the United States, but I got to go compete on behalf of USA all over Europe. And it was such a phenomenal experience. So in 2014, I came back to Oklahoma. I had a contact that got me a job as a roughneck on a drilling rig, and started drilling all over the state. And I was a roughneck, just, you know, the lowliest job you can imagine on a rig, and I loved it. It was great money. Things were good until it wasn't. Cyclical nature of the oil and gas industry in Oklahoma means when times are good, they're real good. When they're bad, everyone gets laid off. And so about a year and a half in, 2 years into roughnecking, our rig was laid over. This will be about 2015, about 2015. And I was the only guy on the rig with a college degree. And so while I was able to rebound really quick, because I used my English degree to get a job at U.S. Grant High School teaching freshman English, my buddies on the rig were left high and dry. They were just waiting for the next boom. I didn't know it at the time, but that's because of Oklahoma's lack of economic diversification and oversized classrooms. And you know, we were trying to put in this daycare in our school, and we had a washer and dryer that we had just set up. You know, I didn't know it at the time either. Oklahoma, #1 in the country for adverse childhood experiences. Kids going to school hungry, bed bugs, in bad situations, getting abused, and then we wonder why they're, you know, having a hard time focusing. I said, where does this all stem from? And then someone mentioned politics, government, choices that are made at the Capitol. I had never even been to the Capitol at this point. Didn't come from a political background, never talked about it in my house. And so I used this Google to look up, find my state legislator, Oklahoma. And of course, like everyone else, you think, oh, James Langford's my state rep, right? And you keep scrolling down, and then you find that person, your state representative and your state senator. And you start to do some research, how they vote on this issue, how they vote for mental health, how they vote for jobs, how they vote for education. And I found out that not only was the current person who was representing me not voting for my best interest, my family's best interest, my coworkers, my friends' best interest, wasn't even voting, not even showing up half the time. So I decided, well, I can do that. I can at least show up. So I started going door to door with all the new time I had on my hands. And I'd go to my neighbors and I'd ask them what was important to them. If they asked me, I'd tell them my story briefly, and then I'd ask for their vote. And I did that for about 8 months straight, from sun up to sundown, knocked on probably 10,000 doors. Our district in South Oklahoma City is very compact. The homes are right next to each other, so on a good day, you could get 150 homes. You probably talk on a good day to 60 homes, 60 people at homes. A lot of doorbell conversations, especially now, not so much back then. I did that, and then in 2016, I beat the incumbent, and I won. And ever since then, I've been trying to make this place a little bit better for people like my brother who suffer from mental health, buddies on the rig who were laid off, teachers, my students, and we've made some progress in that areas, but we are still so far behind, and the priorities are so backwards. And this is where the story comes to you. As citizen activists, lobbyists, people who are concerned about your lives and how local politics affect you, it's so important that you get in and speak up. So we have one person in this group who has reached out to their local lawmakers. And people think, my lawmaker, either they're on the right side, so I don't have to remind them, or they're never going to vote for the way I ask, so I'm not even going to try. #1 most effective way to connect with your lawmaker is to meet with them in person. For many people in Oklahoma, that's not possible because a lot of people live outside the Oklahoma City metro. #2 best way, phone calls. Every phone call you make is tallied, recorded. You're probably not going to talk to the actual elected official, you'll talk to the assistant, but that information is given to the elected official. On a contentious bill that a lot of people are talking about, you hear about it on the news, it's everywhere over Facebook, a high phone call count for a bill like that is like 15 to 20. So while everyone's talking about it on social media and on the news, and it's like seeming like the biggest thing, hardly anyone takes the time to call. After that, of course, it's email, and then it's social media. And if you combine that framework together, you're going to make a difference. One thing I like to do, and this is what I tell people, the most effective way to get your voice heard, other than meeting in person, but still do this in conjunction with it, is you want to call. And if you have to leave a message, do that. Say who you are. You know, you are a constituent. Here's how you feel about this issue. You would like a phone call back, or at least acknowledgement that it was received, and then follow up with an email, and then follow up with an in-person visit. This stuff is going to make a difference. Is it difficult? Yeah, but you know what else is difficult? Not having money to keep the lights on in schools, adverse childhood experiences, rural hospitals closing, things, potholes, things that we want, but a lot of people won't speak up to the right people. And again, you can find this information on Find My Legislator Oklahoma. Another great way that ordinary people can affect change is through the citizen-led ballot initiative. Oklahoma is unique. We're a younger state, 46th state, but we're also only one of 26 states that has the power of the citizen-led ballot initiative. In a ruby red state like Oklahoma, it's why we have criminal justice reform, Medicaid expansion, which has given health insurance to over 260,000 Oklahomans who otherwise wouldn't have it. It's why we have medical marijuana. It's why Oklahoma hasn't raised minimum wage since early 2000s. I think it was 2009. It's still $7.25. We've got a citizen-led ballot initiative that will increase that amount. It's pretty amazing that we have this opportunity. But this power that we have to petition the government and affect change at the grassroots level is being chipped away. Today, the worst bill that I've ever seen passed a Senate committee today. If this bill is signed into law, it will make our citizen-led ballot initiative process impossible. We already have the most stringent requirements of all the states that have it. We have to collect, for a constitutional amendment, 15% of the total votes cast in the last gubernatorial election, and for a statutory change, it's 8%. So you're looking at, for a statutory change, about 95,000 valid voter signatures. They have to sign a petition. By the way, the volunteers going out to get it have 90 days to collect this information. And then they take the Secretary of State. Secretary of State verifies all the signatures are valid, and then the governor gets to pick and choose the date on which that will be voted on. For example, like raising minimum wage, which he slow played that one and kept it off the last November ballot. But going forward, that will be the least of our concerns of getting a state question pushed out. Because these new bills that they're passing, they say that, okay, no, they're saying, we don't think that a vote in Oklahoma City or Tulsa, a signature I mean, is the same as one out in Weatherford. They're saying that every single county has to have a minimum threshold of signatures in order for a state question to get on the ballot. No more than 10% of the total signatures needed to get access on the ballot can come from a city like Oklahoma City. No more than 10% can come from Tulsa. You know what? The reason why signature gatherers hang out in Tulsa and Oklahoma City is because they only have 90 days to collect 95,000 signatures, so they're going to go where the people are. And then I offer an amendment. Okay, if you want volunteers going out to rural Oklahoma, let's extend that time frame from 90 days to at least 180. It would still be on the lower end of all the 26 states that allow. Ohio is indefinite. You can spend as long as you want collecting signatures, and once you reach that threshold, your question gets on the ballot. They say no. They shut it down. That's actually why I wrote this book. This is called The Citizen's Guide to Political Change: How to Win with Ballot Initiatives and Defend Direct Democracy. So the first half of the book is how you can take an idea to the ballot box. You have an idea where you want to fund animal shelters. So you want to have a state policy that appropriates, say, $250,000 every year to municipalities to award competitive grants to local veterinarians that can offer free or highly reduced spay and neuters for low-income folks. Okay, that's a great state question. You can do it by following the formula in this book, just like any other citizen. The second half of the book goes over 10 of the most common tactics that controlling politicians have used, not just in Oklahoma, but around the country, to take away that power of the people. They hate it. They hate it. Controlling politicians hate it when the people mandate them what to do. They would rather tell the people what to do. There's two ways a state question gets to the people. That really hard process that I just told you about that ordinary citizens have to go through, and the legislature. All it takes in the legislature is to pass with a simple majority. That means a 50% plus one. And the House and Senate doesn't even need governor's approval, and then it goes straight to the people as a state question. It's far, far easier for the legislature to do that than for the people to. And another common tactic, I mentioned geographical distribution, where they're saying that you have to get a percentage either from every county or all 5 congressional districts, and if one county doesn't reach that threshold, then the entire thing fails. Another one is raising the actual threshold. So like I get elected by 50% plus 1, that's a simple majority. The idea is to raise any ballot initiative question to 60%. So typically when there's like reproductive freedom, abortion access, it goes on to a state question. It passes overwhelmingly by states. Florida has that amendment where it says it has to pass by 60%. So Florida just had an opportunity to reinstate abortion in their state. It got 58% of the vote for a wide margin, but it didn't reach 60, so they still don't have it. You know, those type of tactics didn't exist 5 years ago. The big catalyst for these tactics that are attacking the citizens' right to petition the government happened in 2022 when Roe v. Wade was overturned. Preemptively, states started making the process harder for ordinary citizens to effect change. In 2016, Oklahoma sent State Question 790 to the vote of the people. They thought, oh, this is going to pass easy. The legislature sent it to the vote of the people saying, we're asking the people if state dollars, public funds, should be able to fund religious purposes and activities like 10 Commandments and posters in classrooms, putting the 10 Commandments at the state capitol. 57% of Oklahomans voted that down. They said no. They said the best way to protect religious freedom is the separation of church and state. Because the moment you start prioritizing one religion over another, that's a violation of the other person's constitutional right of religious freedom. And so the people of Oklahoma stood very clear on that, and they were right, because Article 2, Section 5 says that absolutely no public dollar shall be used to fund any religious purposes, priest, preacher. It's very clear. It's more clear than the First Amendment and Establishment Clause in the U.S. Constitution. And then in 2018, medical marijuana went up to the vote of the people and it passed. And then criminal justice reform passed that same year. And then in 2020, Medicaid expansion passed. And then in 2022, 2022 is Medicaid expansion. And then of course, raising minimum wage and stuff. So that was a catalyst that really got these controlling lawmakers to shut down the citizens' right to affect change at the grassroots level. It's extremely important that we protect that process going forward. That is a major violation of our rights, whether you agree with those issues or not. It helps whatever party is not in a supermajority. So when Democrats used to have control of the House and Senate and governor, the Republicans used it to enact term limits and also right to work, which is the anti-union bill idea. And so it works as a check and balance on politicians who are drunk with power. This book, if you'd like to buy one, it's on Amazon. I have some copies here too. It's $20 for the hardback and $15 for the paperback. But I had a lot of fun writing this book. I had the opportunity to interview some people across the country, just a couple I'll talk about real quick. Katie Fahey from Michigan said she was upset with gerrymandering, and she had this idea that she put on Facebook. She said, I believe that the citizens of Michigan should choose their elected officials. The politicians shouldn't choose their voters. And it really resonated with a lot of people. And people said, yeah, you're right. That's exactly the way it should be. We should have fair redistricting when it comes to drawing the lines every 10 years during the census. And so her Facebook post went viral, and she was successful in ending gerrymandering by implementing an independent redistricting council that then started drawing lines fair. It's more competitive. That way more people feel like running. The more competition you have, the better outcomes typically you're going to have, the better qualified candidates, instead of having a district that's completely lopsided and rigged so the same people continue to win over and over. That's how we have it in Oklahoma. I actually had to participate in that myself against my wishes, but that's the way it is. Desmond Meade, he's out of Florida. Desmond made some terrible choices when he was young. He ended up serving 10 years in the Florida penitentiary. While he was in there, and he got in there as an 18-year-old. In his 20s, he found the prison library, and he started studying up on law. Found out he was very good at it. He studied and got out early on good behavior. He went to the Florida, he took the LSAT, he got into law school, he took the bar, he became an attorney, and his life was completely changed. But you know what? He couldn't vote because he was an ex-felon. He had paid his debt to society. He had done everything right. He was now a productive member of society. But in Florida at the time, ex-felons couldn't vote. So he put his knowledge of law together with some grassroots citizens who were determined to make change. And they went out and collected signatures. And they were successful in getting their question on the ballot. And guess what? Desmond Meade, with his initiative and being proactive, he restored the right to vote to over 4 million Floridians. And so that's the power of the ballot initiative. And then, of course, the majority party in Florida came in and said, if you owe 1 penny in any court fees or anything from prison, then your right to vote isn't allowed. And so, it's another hurdle, right? Another setback. But, because this person had been so successful and had caught national attention, the media came in, there was a bunch of affluent people, athletes, actors, who said, well, we're going to completely forgive everyone's debt. So they shouldn't have had to done it, but they did. And then they were able to overcome that additional hurdle. That's one of my top 3 things is housing, to get the corporate landlords out of Oklahoma, to free up our housing market. I just presented a bill that every single Republican voted to shoot down, but it would have put a moratorium, it would have prohibited corporate landlords from buying up our housing, and it would have required them to sell the ones that they have back to Oklahomans. That bill is completely constitutional, it's completely legal. If you don't know, we put a moratorium on China, Iran, and Russia from buying up rural farmland, because they were buying up rural Oklahoma, artificially inflating prices, making it to where local farmers and ranchers couldn't afford to expand their operations because the property value had gone so high because it was artificially inflated. That's the same concept I wanted to take to hedge fund investors who treat our neighborhoods like stock portfolios. It was very binary. You can side with the people or you can side with the corporations, and they chose to side with the corporations. But that's one issue I'm very passionate about. Of course, direct democracy, making sure that we can still have election recalls at the municipal level. I wish we had that at the state level. I'm working on that. And another thing I'm super passionate about is defending that religious freedom, our religious freedom, by ensuring that the separation of church and state stays intact. We have seen 22 Ten Commandment bills around the country that would mandate that public schools display the 10 Commandments. We have seen another very common bill where they want to replace trained mental health professionals in schools with untrained chaplains. And also we have RFRA bills, which are Religious Freedom Restoration Acts, which give people the legal, makes it legal for people to discriminate if they use their religion as a reason why. And so often what I've seen is that the architects behind these bills that are rooted in Christian nationalism find a way to take public money and keep it for themselves, and they dupe the legislators who are truly thinking they're doing right by, it's not right, it's actually not, it's un-American, it's un-Christian, but they're trying to make their state have dominion over a particular religion, and it's not even like a denomination, but a very strict set of, it's called dominionism. So they want to have basically control over that aspect of society. And the problem with that is that's the whole reason we left the English monarchy, right? Like for religious freedom. And the only way we can keep that religious freedom is that constitutional principle of separation of church and state. And so while we have a lot of bills that would actually affect policy, this new trend that I'm seeing now is more, there's still a lot of that, but they're symbolic. Like just a couple weeks ago in North Dakota, there was a bill introduced that would say that the entire state of North Dakota is under the kingship of Jesus Christ. Montana got that, made a copy bill of that and did that. And then also in West Virginia, it just said, they introduced legislation that said that the Bible, not which Bible, just the Bible, is the supreme document of the entire state of West Virginia. And so these symbolic things, while they don't actually influence legislation, what they do is they familiarize people, they make people become more comfortable with a brand of their state being a Christian state. So then whenever the legislation starts coming down saying, very one-sided, basically taking something that as a parent should be my right to teach my children religious beliefs and what church I decided to take them to, now the government's trying to take that over and give them a very narrow religious perspective of what they believe that is. And as we know, there's a lot of different denominations of just Christianity. There's a lot of different faiths. There's a lot of different beliefs and lack thereof. Like covenant marriage, basically banning divorce for incompatibility would be banned. Yet they won't raise the minimum marriage to 18 years old. That just blows my mind. Like, why are we making it legal for children to get married, often to older men? It's younger women that are getting married to older men, and it's typically done through the church, these arranged marriages. And so absolutely the minimum age for marriage in Oklahoma should be 18, but they will not even give that bill a committee hearing.
What is this week that you talked about?
What's that?
The weeks, you mentioned something about weeks. This, currently some week.
Oh, legislation
Oh,
week.
Oh, that's
What
like
does that mean?
Yeah, so the
Is that a-
legislative process, so we start at the beginning of February, and then we have a constitutional mandate to be done by the end of May. Okay, and in order to stick on schedule, there's deadlines. And so when you write a bill, it's assigned to a committee. There's usually 3 weeks of committee work. Eventually, all of the bills will be either dead, they won't be heard, or they'll have made it out of committee, and then all the work will go to the floor. And then from the floor, there will be some bills that get heard and some that don't. And the ones that are heard and passed will then go over to the Senate side. And it will go through that committee process again. And that's a whole lecture in itself, because oftentimes the House and the Senate are always at odds, and they'll play tit for tat, and they'll withhold hearing each other's bills. It's the whole thing. And then eventually, once it goes through that same process in the Senate, there's a couple things that could happen. If they make some amendments and the primary author accepts it, it'll come back to the House. They'll make the amendment, they'll vote on it again, it'll go to the governor. But there's always a deadline on the process of legislation. And it's really important. So like, I actually ran that spay and neuter bill because we have a terrible problem with overpopulation with cats and dogs, and there's thousands that are unnecessarily euthanized every year. And unfortunately, it's just not a lot of people who spay and neuter their animals, and it's expensive. It's like $160. And so you have a lot of great pet advocacy groups and activists and people who are doing their best, putting their own resources into this issue, but they're needing help from the state. And so my bill would have created a competitive grant program that would have gone to municipalities for them to work with local veterinarians to offer free spay and neutering for those who need it. And that bill didn't, it made it out of committee, but it didn't make the next process because it was kind of like you got bigger fish to fry type of thing again. And so like that bill isn't going anywhere, like my hedge fund bill, those type of things. But eventually now like work on the floor is really ramping up. So we'll be having questions and debates on bills and then passing them over and letting it go through the legislative process. Yeah, if you haven't been to the Capitol lately, I highly recommend it. You know, it's extravagant. It is designed in a way to demand, I guess, some reverence, but also to intimidate a bit. I've heard that from people, especially if you've never been there before. They may be ready to go to talk and share their message with lawmakers, and then they get in there and they're like, okay, I don't belong here, I'm a little freaked out, and then they leave. But if you get a chance to meet with lawmakers, like, they're from all different walks of life, they're just ordinary people. Oftentimes they may not be nearly as knowledgeable about a subject matter as you may be, so they need to hear from you. They need to hear that. Yeah, your question.
So on the ones that don't pass committee or don't go to that next step, like your state new bill or the hedge fund, how do you try again?
Yeah, so
Is it just a matter of, oh, sorry, no, tough luck, or do you go back and go, no, we still need to talk about this kind of situation? Or is there something that we can do as citizens to push the ones that are going, no, that's, we got bigger fish to fry, to say, nope, this is our fish.
yeah.
Yeah, fry this one.
It's a really great question. And every 2 years, we have an election, and bills, every legislative session is 2 years. And so we're in year one of, I think it's the 60th legislature, but that bill will still be alive next year. And we'll have to start over again through the process, but it will still be ready to go next year. Now, if it doesn't go anywhere next year, then it'll be completely done, dissolved. I'll have to rewrite the same bill and submit it again. Having said that, I'm in the minority party. If you're in the supermajority party, you can pretty much do whatever you want. If, like, the Speaker of the House wants it, there's a way to bring dead bills back again all the time. And so, kind of an interesting one. Here's a perfect example to your question. I presented a bill that would have eliminated minimum parking mandates. So the parking requirement would be on the person who's building the property or the commercial space. Obviously, they're going to want to build enough parking spots to accommodate customers, but they're not going to want some arbitrary minimum parking mandate that's going to just be an empty parking lot. I'm thinking Hobby Lobby over there on I-240 in South Penn. Think of that giant parking lot, right? The reason it's that big is because there's minimum parking mandates. And so this bill is actually very popular with business developers and tenants because all of that parking all that parking space could be used for an apartment complex. That maybe not in that commercial zoning, but you get the idea. So when I presented the bill, and I messed up because I didn't give like a one-pager with Q&As. You have to really coddle a lot of legislators. So it showed up, and I didn't do any prep work preparing them for what the bill is. They voted it down. Well, the business community came to me after, and they're like, we thought the bill was going to pass, no problem. We really liked it. We got to get that bill heard again. So they tried to lobby the committee chair to hear it again. The committee chair's like, well, we just got too many bills. We're busy. Now, granted, the committee chair did vote yes on it, but no one else did. And so he said, we'll just bring it up again next year. But if I had been someone of more prominence in the legislature, of higher ranking in the majority party, that could have absolutely been brought back up again. We'll often see a bill that will die on the House floor. They'll go in, they'll whip some votes, they'll say, hey, here, can I make any amendments? And their colleagues will say yes, and then they'll bring the bill back up and it will go for a vote. There was a bill to ban corporal punishment for children in schools, students with disabilities. And so spanking is very common, especially in rural schools. A lot of students get spanked. A lot of students with disabilities get spanked. And as I mentioned, we have #1 adverse childhood experiences. We're the 4th most impoverished state in America. We got really hungry kids. We have a governor who won't accept federal funds for summer lunch shoots. So you got a lot of kids who are bringing trauma from the home into the classroom. And a lot of administrators think the solution is to SWAT. And so this one very aware lawmaker put forth a bill, a good Republican put forth a bill and said students with disabilities shall not be swatted at school. Well, some of the more religious extremists stood up and said that they quoted Old Testament scripture and said if you spare the rod, it's not biblical, and was able to defeat the bill based off Old Testament scripture. Well, of course, it made the headlines. It went international and said that Oklahoma supports spanking children with disabilities in school. And about 3 days of that negative press was cause for the bill to come back up on the House floor, and guess what? It passed.
They say all publicity is good publicity, but not true.
Yeah, and then it went over, in this case, but in this case, it went over to the Senate, and they didn't hear it. And so that same bill is making its way through the process again, this time in the Senate. And another lawmaker was just earlier this week, or maybe last week, was quoting a lot of Old Testament scripture to justify spanking kids with disabilities in school. Thankfully, that bill did pass out of committee.
What inspired you to write that book? I feel for us.
Yeah, so you are the reason I wrote the book. Citizens, ordinary people who want to affect extraordinary change. I hear it all the time. What can I do? What can we do? And of course, like the most immediate thing you can do is call your legislator, email, be in person. But then you have, one thing I didn't mention is you have organizations that are well funded and well organized to help push issues that are important to you, like raising minimum wage or ending gerrymandering, getting money out of politics. There's a lot of nonprofit groups that make this their mission that you can collaborate with to affect change at the grassroots level. But the real, kind of the thing that got me to write this was in the past couple of years, the just onslaught of legislative attacks that I've been seeing that are chipping away at this fundamental constitutional right that we have. And it's getting to the point now after 3 or 4 years, there's a good example of one of their bills, like making it close, but not quite. Making it closer, but not quite. They just are very consistent and continuing to do it. And now we're at a point where there's a lot of bills that are going to severely, if that bill I mentioned passes, I would say that there will never be another citizen-led ballot initiative on the state as a state question again in Oklahoma. Because with that limited time frame and that extreme restriction on limited number of signatures allowed in Tulsa and Oklahoma City, there's too much pasture to go out and stand at the Piggly Wiggly and say, will you sign my petition? Because they have to get over 90,000 signatures in 90 days. You can hang out in every little small town and never reach that threshold, whereas on a pretty day you could go to Scissortail Park and collect 500 valid signatures. But what difference does it make? They're Oklahoma voters. And there's a lot of people from out of Oklahoma City who come to the city to enjoy our amenities, where we actually invest in ourselves. And so it's just a voter suppression tactic. And I wanted to get that on paper.
Help me help you.
Yeah, well, I guess if you'd like to buy a copy and maybe talk about it, pitch it on social media,
I think that'd be a great idea.
mention it. But yeah, it's full of fun stories, and then step by step, and I wrote it like I would, like I'm teaching my freshman English students. It's not a lot of legalese or anything like that. It's a fun read, and that's what I've been told.
Can it be applied in another state, those 2 states? The
The
principles,
the principles, yeah, in a sense of advocacy. But for example, Texas doesn't have citizen-led ballot initiatives. This idea came around in the progressive era when monopolies were getting built up, and people wanted a check and balance on how much power was getting out of control, much like it is today. A lot of people say we're living in another progressive era. It's when they wanted to make sure that the people still had some power. And so Oklahoma, being a relatively young state, we were able to be the very first state in the union to incorporate the citizen-led ballot initiative in our original state's constitution. But a lot of the older states, they don't have this ability. It's more of Midwest, West Coast. It's kind of a newer idea, relatively speaking,
The other question.
1800s.
Can't these things be electronically signed instead of being face to face?
That's one of the good things about it, though, because actually, if you let me read a little bit, on the first page here, I say direct democracy requires face-to-face interactions, breaking the barrier of digital screens. It requires us to step outside of our silos, embrace new ideas, and engage in a meaningful dialogue, something our society desperately needs. And so by requiring petitioners to go out and have a conversation with you around raising minimum wage, for example, that will often stem to other ideas. And I've had, when I'm out collecting signatures, people say, I don't like that idea, but I like that you're out engaging in citizenship and, civic engagement. And, sometimes people will sign it and they'll feel good about it, and then they'll want to get involved, and they'll go. And so having that in person is one of the last things that we have to break that digital divide. A lot of people talk about voting digitally, and none of our voting machines in Oklahoma are connected to the internet. So it's all paper ballot. And at the end of if you're running a campaign and you want to know real quick if you won in a precinct, you have someone run out there, you go yourself, and they'll put an actual receipt outside of the polling place that will give you the exact number of ballots counted. But those paper ballots fall into the thing there. But that's one reason why Oklahoma is not the most secure and safe state for elections. But every state is allowed to run their elections a little bit differently. Most voting machines are not connected to the internet to prevent hackers and stuff like that. I don't know of any voting machines that are actually connected to the internet. But some of them don't have paper ballots. Like in Louisiana, they have to basically press a board, and then it's computed in the machine, and then a poll worker takes the tally and then posts it. So it's a little bit different. But it is a good idea, even as we continue to advance with blockchain and whatnot. It's still, there's something about being out in the community, having that face-to-face signature gathering.
That deadline thing,
The deadline,
I
and
mean,
yep.
So, I mean, for me, signing into the government website, I gotta use my IDB or login.gov, something like that, where it's more secure.
One thing I thought about doing is you still have petitioners who are in person collecting signatures, but if they were to do it on an iPad and they could verify real quick with either state ID, you don't need a state ID, but you could verify on the spot that you're a valid voter in Oklahoma. Well, we're talking about tactics to suppress this ballot initiative. Before, a couple years ago, you needed 2 of the 5 data points to match in order for it to be considered valid. So if you do sign one of these petitions, make sure you're using the name that you put to register to vote. So my real name is Mickey Dollens. If I were to sign one of these petitions, Mick, like some people call me Mick, that would be one strike on the, that, it would say that would be red flag number 1 for discrediting my thing. If I don't write in all caps, that's red flag number 2. And if I mess up one letter or number on my address, that's red flag number 3. My signature is invalid. And so that used to be I think it was 3 of the 5, and they increased that criteria to 4 out of 5. So 100% you have valid voter signatures that are being tossed out because they didn't meet 4 of the 5 criterias to make it count.
Wow.
You have to be so spot on, and oftentimes people are at the park with their family, you're going out, it's I like that idea, let me sign it, okay, and then it's really incumbent upon the petitioner gatherer to make sure it's right. And then when they take that, they take them, boxes of them, of course it's typically if you need 90,000 signatures, you're going to want to turn in about 120,000 because you can bet that there's going to be a whole lot that are tossed out. And because they don't get their information just right, but then also sometimes people who aren't registered to vote will sign it anyway. Sometimes people from out of state will sign it anyway. Rest assured, those are caught in the system and they're discarded. And so anytime you have a vote on a state question that came from the people, those are actual citizens who registered to vote who wanted to get that on the ballot.
And they verify the addresses?
They do verify them. Yeah. So when I if I were to go knock your door and ask for your vote, there's a few things that I know based off the voter file. I know how you're registered to vote, your address, how often you vote, and this is public information you have to, and your name. But I don't know who you voted for in the past. just know that you have voted, how often. So like, if you're running for school board, you could use the voting system to narrow it down to the people who only vote in school board elections, or like super voters, or maybe they vote in primary elections. That'd be another good turnout voter. But if it's someone who only votes in presidentials, you may not want to go, spend your valuable time talking to that person, because there's a good chance they're not going to turn out to vote in something like a school board race. But if you want to know, like, how or when's the last time you voted, you can go to badvoter.org, put in some information, and it will tell you the last time you voted.
Is that a legit website?
Yeah, and then also if you want to like learn about where your voting location is, because every now and then they change up, every 10 years. If you go to actually Google this, Oklahoma voter portal. That will take you to the right link. Then will tell you, one, who all your elected officials are. It'll tell you where your polling location is, and it will even give you a sample ballot about 70 days out from the election. They'll give you a sample ballot that way, and if you want it, you can actually print off that sample ballot, fill it in the way you like it. You can take that in with you and use it as a cheat sheet to mark your actual ballot, and then you scan it. Because that one you print off, it's not going to be registered by the Scantron. So that's just kind of a tip that some people like to do. Now, of course, you have early voting. That's very popular. The voting centers were really crowded in the last general election. It would be nice to open that up a little bit longer. A lot of people like to vote early. Of course, a lot of people like to vote absentee. There's a legislator who's got a bill that would require people voting absentee to give a reason they want to basically you have to give a reason why. I mean, it's convenient. That's no other fundamental right do we have where we have to give the government a reason for why we're exercising that right. If you go to buy a gun, you don't have to tell them why you're buying a gun. You have to do background check, okay, but you don't have to say why you want the gun. If you're gonna host a protest, or if you're gonna give a speech in public, you may need a permit to have that area at the Capitol to protest, but you don't have to explain why or what you're protesting. So the fact that this person wants to make citizens give the government a reason why to vote absentee is ridiculous.
Is the reason why they make it so hard for citizens to vote and make changes is because they want to remain in power?
No, that's a big part of it. There's a lot of election paranoia, even though Oklahoma is one of the safest and secure and has the most integrity of any election state when it comes to our elections. We continue to see these bills that are preemptive. Like for example, I mentioned like a voting center. That's where people go in a county to vote early. The voting centers currently are not open on election day. I guess if a county wanted to, they could, but we're hearing a bill now that would ban that at the local level. It would ban voting centers from being open on election day. I was looking into ranked choice voting, which is an election reform that would require that candidates running for office be a bit more moderate, because they would require them to appeal to a broader electorate. Just by mentioning ranked choice voting, got it banned. Yeah, and so, I would say absolutely the idea is to make that process more difficult. As I mentioned, like currently there's not a photo ID needed. That could change. They're wanting, you sign up, register to vote, you prove you're a citizen, they send you your voting card, they want you to take that voting card to the DMV, like everyone's got transportation, show them that, and then they'll print you off a free card with your photo on it. Now you have to take that to your polling location in order to vote. That's not the law, but that's a bill that was floated last year, and it's again this year. Well, I'll tell you this, kind of a happier story. Some good things that are happening. I have a constituent who is a member of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribe, and about 7 years ago now, her cousin Ida Beard went missing in Indian country out in the Cheyenne and Arapaho area out by El Reno, and they went to the county and they said, "Oh, we can't help it. This happened in Indian country. You need to go to the state." She went to the state and they're like, "This isn't part of our jurisdiction. You need to go to the federal government." Back and forth, getting the roundabout. And so she came to me and she's like, "How can we streamline this process?" Because Oklahoma It's the top state for missing and murdered indigenous people, women and girls particularly. And so we got together and we started working on legislation that created a position within the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation to help families navigate that jurisdictional boundaries of laws, and created a liaison with an OSBI to help families get to answers quicker. And while they haven't solved the missing case of Ida Beard, it has helped a lot of people have resolution. And that particular legislation has been modeled in other states across the country. And we have this system called NAMUS, where anytime someone, like for example, is out hunting, they come across human remains that are unidentifiable, they put it in this national database. It cross-references all these other, like if your loved one goes missing, you could give them your toothbrush. That DNA is in this national system. They find some remains, it matches up. Some people finally have closure, right? So that's something that we've made a lot of progress on. It's helped a lot of people. And Lorinda Morgan is that person's name. You may know her. She's around here, and she's a great person and great constituent. And then also another example of great advocacy work is this family that reached out to me because their son, Brendan McLarty, had never had any issues with respiratory illnesses. He was a high school junior and was out playing baseball and suffered a really bad asthma attack. And he died right after baseball practice, right in high school. And they realized that if an albuterol inhaler would have been nearby, it would have saved his life. So we worked on legislation that would allow they started a nonprofit in memory of Brendan, and they raised funds and they buy in albuterol inhalers, and their idea is to get 2 of them in every school in Oklahoma. But of course, there's liability with that, so we passed a law that said a designated person, such as a school nurse, would be allowed to administer an albuterol inhaler that's purchased by the nonprofit to a student that's having a respiratory attack and an emergency. And of course, that bill went through, it's a common sense bill, it passed, and they have put albuterol inhalers in every school in Oklahoma, and it's been used. I mean, I think by this time, we passed that law like 5 years ago. By the way, I'm in my 9th year in the legislature. I think they've used the inhalers on over 100 kids since it's been in, and these are like severe emergency situations where the kids either don't have an inhaler or they left home without it. But that's a great example of turning tragedy into something that honors their family member, but it's also saving lives going forward. And so I would say like a key component to all of that is bringing your personal and lived experiences to the policy in which you want to lobby for, and that can make a big difference in getting it over the finish line.
Solely for the fact, and I mean, I'll be candid, you were the kind of person that I would want to see run our state. Someone that comes from our roots, someone that's from Bartlesville, Oklahoma, and someone that has done the things that you've done. Those are the kind of people we need in the future of our government, in the future of our state government specifically. As you said, we're not ranking very high on a lot of things except for flu cases, and that needs to change. Like that only can start at some point, and things, especially like with your experience with schools and what are we ranked 49th right now in education? 50th, and we've been last. And I, like you, I've got a 9-year-old, I've got a 6-year-old. I don't want my kids to have to go through that. I'm a product of the 50th in the state, and I'm 34, still in college, looking at her going, I can't write for poop. I don't want my kids to experience that. And I need people like yourself and people with the same mentality of, we're here for the people of my state, not for the money or what have you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
I
You're
agree.
exactly the reason why we're in, and opportunity, right? We want opportunity for our kids and the future of the state, level playing field, people to have the resources, the opportunity to make the most of their potential is what we need.
My son goes to what would be considered an independent school, a low income school. And I'm very blessed in my income and very blessed for my family. I do go to pick him up and pick my daughter up from the same school where we live. Some of these kids' health, their only meal is gonna be out of the school.
Yeah.
And, that's not cool, not acceptable. These are children, these are the future of our country, and we can't even feed them. It's ridiculous, and I hate to see it, and so, that spoke volumes to me when you mentioned that. Absolutely.
Totally respect you because your involvement as a father means so much. There's only so much a teacher can do, but you being involved there for your kids, teaching them your wisdom, passing that on, is going to make all the difference in the world. I remember when I was teaching at Grant, it was really difficult to get parents to even come to parent-teacher conferences. And a lot of them, granted, were working. A lot of them were English as a second language, so they didn't feel comfortable coming out. But I've seen how parent involvement makes a difference, and I do feel like that ranking of 50 out of 51 is based off of like per pupil funding. It's based off of not just, it's not all test scores. It's about the state's priorities in investing in public education. And the teachers that we have in this state, for a large part, do a lot with the limited resources they have. So my daughter's still in daycare, but my son goes to more public schools. And the teachers there are really good. And they also are supported with parents who are involved. But when I taught at US Grant, that wasn't the case. And that's where those kids need extra help. Like I mentioned, we were building a daycare. We had a food pantry, we had a washer and dryer, and those were necessary. But some of the lived experiences that they brought from the house to the classroom were just really devastating. And that's where government comes in to help those kids, elevate them. Those kids who were born on home, are disadvantaged to those like mine who were born on second base. They're already there. They've got two parents who are available, who have decent jobs, and are involved in their lives, and that's just not the case for a lot of kids around here. And a lot of that is systemic, comes to low wages, poverty. It's really, really difficult. We've got a lot of great single parents out there. I'm a single dad, who are doing a lot, but they are stressed, and it's just so hard. And the debt and getting out of a system that just seems almost impossible can be a lot for anyone. And that's where I feel like that's the most important part of government, right? Is to help the people who are trying to help themselves. And to make sure there's a level playing field and that everyone has an opportunity to make the most of what they have. And people can be free. People aren't mandated to believe a certain way. People can believe what's important to them and teach their kids the same way as long as they're not hurting other people in the process. It's one of the great things we have about America. We have to make sure that stays intact. One of the biggest threats to public education right now is the systemic ways in which they're trying to privatize it. This private school voucher is a coupon for parents who already send their kids to the private school. Over 90% of the people who are using this private school voucher already send their kids to private school. They call it school choice, but it's really the school chooses. The private schools don't have to take the kids with an IEP. They don't have to take the disruptors, the kids whose parents aren't involved, the parents whose, the kids who speak English as a second language. They're receiving state dollars, but they're not held to the same accountability, the same acceptance. And so they get the most involved kids, the kids who have a lot of advantages, who are already going there, and they can say, look at our, in reality, the data shows they're not that much better academically, but there is, since desegregation, there was this movement to sprawl from urban areas, create these private schools, and then find a way to take public dollars and give them to the parents, call it parent choice, and defund public schools because they were mad about desegregation, and then give public dollars to private schools and parents who send there. And what that does is it makes it to where you have less teacher retention and you have less opportunities for kids, especially in the inner city schools. And growing up in Bartlesville, I was in a different situation because my great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my dad all worked their entire careers with Phillips 66. And my dad was the first one to go from the oil fields to OSU and then the corporate offices in Phillips. Well, Phillips is a worldwide company, and they know that in order to recruit and retain the best employees around the world, their quality of life in Bartlesville has to be really outstanding, because they're bringing in the best engineers from all over the world. They're like, hey, move to Bartlesville, your family's gonna have economic opportunity, your kids are gonna have great parks, sports facilities are gonna be nice. And so growing up, Phillips 66 was like funding our STEM labs, and STEAM now, but they were like, investing in the community, making Bartlesville a desired place to live so they could have a better company, and it worked. And so why the state of Oklahoma doesn't take a page from that playbook and replicate it across the state is just beyond me. That requires investment, like at Oklahoma City. We choose maps over and over, and as a result, we have Scissortail Park. We have fun things to do. We've got different amenities and things that make Oklahoma City desirable. We've got a great moderate mayor that's appealing to businesses wanting to relocate. And as a result, we're growing at a really fast rate, but that can't be said for the rest of Oklahoma. They're really suffering. And so that investment, some people look at it as like taxation is theft, but if it's used and managed well, obviously it needs to be accounted for and invested wisely in things that will have ROI, then it really does lift all, a rising tide lifts all boats, as they say. So, yeah, another ROI thing is, so like on my pet protection bill, on the spay and neutering, that a study was shown that for every $1 we invest in that spay and neuter program, we receive $4 to $5 on investment, because we're having less money being spent on unnecessary euthanasias. We're having less crowdedness in these animal welfare, county or municipal shelters. And also, it's a public safety issue, because there's so many wild dog bites, especially in the springtime, because of the overpopulation problem. So not only are we getting a great ROI, but we're also making our communities safer. And that still wasn't enough to get it over the finish line. But those, I just think that kind of framing of a message can really go a long way, especially when it's a constituent reaching out. You're going to have a lot better luck getting your lawmakers' attention than I will as a concerned citizen who can vote for them and also organize against them. And I will say, I don't want to go too far over, but when it comes to organizing and being against something, obviously it's a very passionate thing. I've seen this go terribly wrong, where someone has taken their passion, but it's fueled into rage and they get shut down. I've seen people throw water on legislators in the Capitol. I've seen people after they threw water, they start pushing back, and they get in trouble with the police. And there's some people who have taken things too far and will cuss and yell and scream at lawmakers. And while that passion is there, that's a really quick way to shut down lawmakers who would even have a hard time hearing that person out in the first place. And that's just the nature of some people's personalities, to shut people down who scream at them. But in order to be an effective citizen lobbyist, if you approach it with the foundational knowledge, with a personal story, and with how in some way it will reflect well on the lawmaker, here's some publicity, here's some positive press, here's how it'll make you look good, you're going to have a lot better chance of getting your idea heard and at least making steps toward change than you would trying to force an issue or trying to mandate that they hear your bill. And it may take a while, right? The first year it may make it through a committee, and the next year it goes through committee and then the House, and then the next year it goes. But sometimes it takes a long time, and sometimes it'll go right through. But if you continue, like Kaylee, finding ways to get your message heard and to make change at the grassroots level, it will ultimately, in some way or another, be beneficial and rewarding.